Two Viking warriors stand on a shoreline in the grey light before dawn. One is 24, the other is 53. They are about to board the same longship, row the same distance, and face the same enemy on the other side. By every measure modern medicine uses to predict what happens to the male body. After 40, the declining energy, the shrinking muscle, the hormones quietly dropping year by year, the older man should be a fraction of what he once was. He is not. He moves with the same controlled force he had at 30. His shoulders carry the same load. His body does not announce his age the way modern men's bodies do. And the reason has nothing to do with Viking mythology, nothing to do with genetics, nothing to do with anything you can buy. Researchers tracking testosterone levels across populations have found something deeply uncomfortable. A man in his 50s today has measurably lower testosterone than a man the same age had just 30 years ago. Not because men are aging faster, but because of how modern men live. The hormonal decline is not a function of time. It is a function of lifestyle. And the Viking on that shoreline, without a gym, a clinic, or any understanding of what a hormone even is, was accidentally doing something every single day that the modern man has completely stopped doing. 6 things, to be precise. This video is about what they were, and why, without anyone noticing, the modern world quietly took every single one of them away. If you want to understand how a 53-year-old warrior could carry the same load as a man 30 years younger, stay with this. Because the answer has nothing to do with what he took. It has everything to do with how he lived. And the biology behind it is something that has not changed in 1,000 years. That Viking standing on the shoreline? He had never heard the word testosterone. He had no concept of hormones, endocrine function, or anabolic response. He was just a man living the only life available to him in 9th century Scandinavia. Cold, relentless, and completely unoptimized by any modern standard. And yet the life that environment forced on him was producing something in his body that modern men spend thousands trying to replicate. Not because he was extraordinary, but because he was ordinary. Because every Viking man lived roughly the same way, and their bodies responded to that life the way the male body has always responded when it is given what it requires. Here is what makes this worth paying attention to. In 2007, a team of researchers at the New England Research Institutes published a study that should have changed the conversation about men's health permanently. They tracked the same population of men across 3 measurement periods, spanning 15 years. What they found was not subtle. Men of the same age were producing significantly less testosterone than men of the same age had produced 15 years earlier. The researchers controlled for obesity, smoking, and alcohol use. The decline persisted. Something in the texture of modern life, not the passage of years, was suppressing testosterone at the population level. A separate analysis published in European Urology Focus found that testosterone deficiency in young American men had more than doubled in the 17 years between 1999 and 2016. In men in their 20s. The supplement industry's response to this was predictable. More products, higher prices, better marketing. What they never told you is that the research consistently points to the same cluster of lifestyle factors as the cause, and that a civilization living 1,000 years ago was accidentally addressing every single one of them without knowing it. The Viking did not fix this. He never broke it in the first place. And the first reason why is something so ordinary that when you hear it, your instinct will be to dismiss it. But my advice is, don't. The first thing was the physical demand that started before sunrise and did not end until the work was done. This was not scheduled exercise, and it was not a 45-minute session booked into a calendar. This was the kind of sustained, compound, full-body effort that the male body evolved to produce hormones in response to. Farming required hauling, carrying, and lifting against real resistance for hours. Rowing a loaded Norse longship engaged the legs, the core, the shoulders, the back, and the forearms simultaneously, not for 20 minutes, but for the length of a journey. And besides that, they also practiced glima, the Norse wrestling tradition documented across the Icelandic sagas. Glima was practiced from boyhood throughout adult life, in all weather, without exception. Historical accounts record that glima continued through blizzards because real combat would not wait for calm conditions. Research by Vingren and colleagues, published in Sports Medicine in 2010, one of the most cited papers in exercise endocrinology, confirmed that heavy compound movements recruiting multiple large muscle groups simultaneously are one of the most reliable triggers of acute testosterone elevation in men. The mechanism is direct. Multi-joint movements under real load trigger luteinizing hormone release, which signals testosterone production in the testes. The effect is strongest when the load is unpredictable and full body. Carrying, rowing, wrestling. Not isolation exercises on machines that remove every element of instability. The Viking produced this stimulus every single day as a byproduct of staying alive. The modern man, if he trains at all, produces it twice a week for 45 minutes. That gap is significant, but it is not the largest gap. The second thing the Viking had is where the research becomes almost confrontational in its precision. Without artificial light, the Viking went to bed when the sun went down and woke when it rose. 7 to 8 hours, consistently timed, in complete darkness. A study published in JAMA in 2011 by Lepreul and Van Korter at the University of Chicago took healthy young men and restricted them to under 5 hours of sleep per night for 1 week. Testosterone dropped by 10 to 15% in 1 week. The researchers noted that the hormonal profile produced was clinically indistinguishable from androgen deficiency. The majority of daily testosterone is secreted during the first 3 hours of uninterrupted slow-wave sleep. Disrupt that window, and the production simply does not happen. The modern man sleeps an average of under 7 hours, with blue light from screens suppressing melatonin and pushing sleep onset later into the night. That combination compresses the window that testosterone production depends on. Obviously, the Viking had no screens. The sun decided for him, and his hormones responded accordingly. 2 practices, both products of necessity, both confirmed by peer-reviewed research to be directly relevant to testosterone. And neither of them is the one that surprises people most, because the third practice, the one that ties all of this together, is about something the Viking did every single day that the modern man has been specifically trained to avoid. He ate twice a day. The dagmal in the morning, skyr, rye bread, leftover stew from the previous night. The natmal in the evening, meat, fish, vegetables. Between those 2 meals stretched 16 to 18 hours without food. That is when food was available, and that is the pattern the day imposed. Skyr deserves a specific mention. It is a fermented dairy product native to Scandinavia, and it contains approximately 11 grams of protein per 100 grams, higher than most modern dairy. But skyr was not the exception. It was representative of the entire pattern. Every component of the Viking meal, the fish, the meat, the fermented foods, the dark rye bread, was built around the same principle without anyone designing it that way. Dense nutrition, real ingredients, nothing that came in a packet. And together, those meals provided the zinc, magnesium, and healthy fats that testosterone synthesis requires at the cellular level, in ways the modern diet, for all its variety, consistently fails to deliver. And then there is what was missing from his plate. What was absent from the Viking diet matters just as much as what was present. Every meal he did not eat, every processed ingredient that did not exist, every refined oil that had not been invented was quietly protecting something. Chronic systemic inflammation, now understood to directly suppress the testicular cells responsible for producing testosterone, was low, not because anyone designed it that way, but because nothing existed to cause it. The food itself was only part of the story. What happened in the hours between his last meal and his first meal? Those 16 to 18 hours of silence triggered a hormonal response that no meal could replicate. Research by Ho and colleagues, published in the Journal of Clinical Investigation in 1988, and now one of the most cited studies in endocrinology, found that fasting significantly increases growth. Hormone secretion, both the frequency and the amplitude of each pulse. Growth hormone works in direct partnership with testosterone. It preserves lean mass, mobilizes stored fat, and maintains the hormonal environment that testosterone production operates within. The Viking was triggering this response every single day without knowing it existed. And then there was the stress. This is the one that is most misunderstood, and the one the supplement industry has the least financial interest in explaining. Viking stress was real. A raid could kill you. A winter could starve your family. A storm could sink your ship. But it was episodic, intense, then resolved, then recovered from. Research by Brownlee and colleagues confirmed that chronically elevated cortisol suppresses testosterone through a direct inverse relationship. The key word is chronically. Acute stress followed by genuine recovery does not produce the same suppressive effect. The Vikings' stress was the former. The modern man's stress is low-grade, ambient, and unresolvable, present in every commute and every notification. That distinction is not trivial. It is one of the primary mechanisms through which the modern lifestyle suppresses the male hormonal system. And the Viking, living in an environment that imposed hard physical work, followed by genuine rest, natural darkness, and seasonal recovery periods, was managing cortisol with a precision no supplement has ever matched. And then there is the sixth practice. It was removed so gradually, so naturally, so completely embedded in the shift to modern living, that most men do not even notice it is gone. Think about your day yesterday. How much of it did your body actually move? I do not mean a workout session or a scheduled window. I mean simply moved, carried something, walked somewhere, or used its own weight against resistance for more than a few minutes at a time. For the Viking, that question had no answer. The movement never stopped. Movement was not extracted from life and scheduled into it. It was woven through every hour. Research on sedentary behavior consistently links prolonged inactivity to reduced testosterone, independent of formal exercise. You can train 3 times a week and still suppress your hormones for the other 23 hours by sitting still. That is the sixth practice. It is the one that costs the modern man the most, not because it is the most powerful in isolation, but because it happens every single hour of every single day when he is not paying attention to it. So in the end, the 53-year-old Viking loading that longship was not exceptional. He was not the product of superior genetics or a specially designed program. He was the product of an environment that gave his body what it required every single day without interruption, because the alternative was death. You do not need his environment. You need his inputs. Here is what you can do today. First, add 3 to 4 compound resistance sessions per week. Squats, deadlifts, carries, rows, pressing and pulling. Movements that recruit the whole body and trigger the hormonal response that machines cannot replicate. The Viking produced this signal every day. You need it 3 times a week. The gap between that and what most men currently do is the entire gap between where their testosterone is and where it could be. Aim for 7 to 8 hours of sleep, consistently timed, in a dark room with no screens in the final hour before bed. The testosterone secreted during slow-wave sleep cannot be recovered by sleeping longer the following night. The JAMA study showed a 10 to 15% drop from 1 week of insufficient sleep, the hormonal equivalent of aging 10 to 15 years. That drop is happening to men who consider themselves healthy. Every night they compromise that window. Speaking of windows, try eating in a window. Not some aggressive protocol, but simply finishing your evening meal and not eating again until morning. The interval the Viking maintained by default every single day. Real food built around protein, fish, and whole ingredients. Not because it is a diet plan, but because that is what testosterone synthesis requires at the cellular level. Also, add movement that is not confined to sessions. Walk when you could drive, carry when you could wheel. Let your day contain physical demand, rather than extracting all demand from it. The Viking at 53 was not defying time. He was simply living in a way that did not sabotage the biology time was working with. His testosterone was not exceptional for a Viking his age. It was normal. What has become exceptional, what the research now confirms is increasingly rare, is the modern man who maintains anything close to it. That is the secret. And it was never hidden. It was just replaced, convenience by convenience, by things that were easier to sell. Subscribe. There is far more where this came from, and most of it has been waiting in plain sight for over 1,000 years.